I'm Diane Macedo. Today on ABC News Live, federal criminal charges have been unsealed against FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried. The man behind the crypto company that had a $32 billion collapse is now facing multiple fraud charges in the U.S. What to expect as he faces a judge today. The major energy breakthrough, how it could help fight climate change and how long until the discovery could power your house. The new details in the Idaho College murder mystery, why police are expanding their investigation across state lines as we learn more about the, quote, army of analysts working to crack the case. But we begin with Sam Bankman-Fried now facing 8 counts of conspiracy and fraud charges in the U.S. after being arrested in the Bahamas. The founder of the cryptocurrency company FTX also faces civil fraud charges in connection with the multi-billion-dollar collapse of his company. Chief Business Correspondent Rebecca Jarvis has the latest.
Sam Bankman-Fried, once celebrated as the poster child for transparency in cryptocurrency.
Thank you, Chair Waters, Ranking Member McHenry, and all the members of the committee for having me here today to testify. It's an honor to be here.
Whose company FTX inked splashy partnerships with celebs like Tom Brady.
You know what? I'm in.
And Steph Curry.
This is Steph Curry, the world's leading expert on cryptocurrency.
I'm not.
Arrested overnight by local authorities in the Bahamas at the request of the U.S. government. Charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The move coming just 4 weeks after Bankman-Fried's cryptocurrency exchange, FTX, one of the largest in the world, valued at over $32 billion earlier this year, filed for bankruptcy. Our George Stephanopoulos sitting down with Bankman-Fried in the Bahamas for his first network interview shortly after.
A lot of people look at you and see Bernie Madoff.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's who I am at all, but I understand why they're saying that. People lost money.
In fact, FTX customers lost billions. At issue now is why. 30-year-old Bankman-Fried allegedly used FTX customer deposits to fund risky bets at the other company he created and owned, a hedge fund called Alameda.
Are you worried about going to jail?
There are a lot of things that are worrying me right now. And, you know, as best as possible, I'm trying to focus on what I can do going forward to be helpful and, you know, let whatever, you know, regulatory and legal processes are happening play out as they will.
All right, thanks to Rebecca Jarvis for that report. And let's bring in senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky for more on this. Aaron, the Southern District of New York has just unsealed these 8 counts of fraud and conspiracy charges. Now, they have a lot of experience prosecuting financial crimes. So what do we know at this point about how prosecutors are building this case?
It was incredibly fast. From the time that FTX declared bankruptcy, $32 billion collapse, to the time of these criminal charges is just a month. And prosecutors haven't said how they were able to do it so quickly, but they've charged Sam Bankman-Fried with 8 counts of fraud and conspiracy, alleging that he cheated FTX customers by shifting their money into his private hedge fund, Alameda Research, to pay its debts and expenses and to make his own venture investments. Bankman-Fried told ABC's George Stephanopoulos just a couple of weeks ago he did not know of any misappropriation of customer funds, but the way the complaint from the Securities and Exchange Commission and the criminal indictment from federal prosecutors in New York makes it seem this was going on from the very start of FTX. Its customer funds constantly being funneled into Alameda Research for Bankman-Fried's own benefit.
And yet FTX was valued at about $32 billion. Less than a year ago. So how are they accounting for that, the dramatic nature of this collapse?
There were billions of dollars invested, and despite assurances that those investments were safe and that the risk was minimal, prosecutors and the securities regulators say it was just a house of cards that Sam Bankman-Fried had built, declaring it the safest place, safest building on earth to park your crypto. But instead, it was used to make his own real estate purchases, to fund a lifestyle for himself, and also to to make his own risky investments.
Aaron, there were a lot of celebrities behind this campaign. We just saw an ad with Steph Curry. Tom Brady was big in their ads. Is there any sense that other people could take a fall in this case, or is this really just focused on one person?
He's charged with conspiracy, but it doesn't name other conspirators, so it's certainly possible, although typically when prosecutors build a case, they start from the bottom and try to get to the big fish. In this case, they've already got Sam Bankman-Fried charged criminally and have him in court in the Bahamas awaiting extradition to the United States. So whether anyone else faces charges, we just don't know yet.
All right, Aaron Katersky, it's great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And medical facilities are on the brink across the country amid a surge in respiratory viruses. Hospitals are at nearly 80% capacity nationwide, and ABC's Faith Abube has the latest from the University of New Mexico Hospital, where the situation is becoming dire. Hi, Faith.
Yeah, the clash of the flu, COVID, and RSV has overwhelmed hospitals all across New Mexico. The situation is so urgent at this particular hospital that they've set up an emergency triage area right outside the emergency room. This is actually the patient drop-off area. Come on inside. Let me show you what's going on. This is where patients can check in with medical staff when they arrive. And then over here, they're told to wait. Doctors are able to screen them and determine the course of treatment. And then if they need to lie down, they can go around the corner where there are beds set up. This is being treated as another exam room because inside, they've been over capacity for several weeks now. The hospital's medical chief officer is calling the situation the most difficult time he's ever seen in his years of medicine, even worse than the peak of COVID. Nationwide, nearly every state is reporting very high or high levels of flu-like activity. Hospital beds are nearly 80% full. The wait times are long, and doctors are pleading with people to only go to the ER when it's a life-threatening emergency. With more holiday gatherings just around the corner, experts believe there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is the fact that the flu vaccine, it's not too late to get it. It's not too late to get the COVID booster shot as well. And medical experts are advising people to put their masks back on when they're indoors. Diane?
All right, Faith Abube, thank you. And a second demonstrator has been executed as Iran carries out public executions in the wake of nationwide anti-government protests. Those protests follow the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, who died after being arrested by the country's morality police. At least 20 more people are currently facing execution as those protests enter their fourth month. Assistant Professor of Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Texas at Austin, Nahid Siamdoust, joins me now for more on this. Nahid, thank you so much for being here. You know, despite
Thank
these,
you for having me.
In some cases gruesome, these public executions, these protests are still going on across the country. So what does this mean for Iran right now and the people there?
That's right. The protests are falling, and not least the executions themselves are actually spurring on further protests because, you know, the number of people who've been killed in these protests, over 400, and the number of people who are still in prison, 14,000, and those at risk of death and execution, those are actually bringing more people into the streets, fighting for their rights and asking for their release, and also just, you know, expressing their complete sort of condemnation, the people's condemnation of these executions, which, you know, the first one who was executed, Mohsen Shekari, was based on the judge's order, executed for having burned a garbage can and having blocked the street.
Now, this all started, all these protests, with the death of Mahsa Amini after being arrested by the morality police. So can you take a step back and explain what the morality police is in Iran, and how significant is it that there are reports now that the morality police has been disbanded or suspended?
Right. So the morality police was formed a few years after the revolution. And initially, it was really not much of a systematic force. It was committees and bands that would go around and, you know, arrest women and apprehend women and give them certain punishment, whether it was fines or even lashings for not wearing the hijab properly. Eventually, with time, you know, we've had 43 years of the Islamic Republic. Now it became more systematic, and the force was put under the auspices of the police. And so more recently, this past year, the morality police became a whole lot more active because Ebrahim Raisi, the new president of Iran, is more conservative, and he vowed to bring morality back to the streets, not least because over the last few years, Iranian women have actually pushed against the hijab and on their own accord, and, you know, what you would call a non-movement on a daily basis, just started sort of loosening the hijab. And so what you would see on the streets was not so much of a sort of strict adherence to the hijab, which Iranian women have been fighting for. And so with Raisi and his promise to bring greater morality to the streets, these women were apprehended, and then Mahsa Jina Amini, as we know, over 3 months ago was killed. And then more recently, we had this, statement from the prosecutor general that the morality police had been disbanded. I think we need to really approach that very cautiously, because right after he made that statement, it sort of haphazardly in the middle of a press conference, it wasn't an intentional statement by the Iranian government. Other officials and he himself came forward to say, we will still police and regulate women's hijab on the streets. So it really remains to be seen what really happens to the force.
It sure does. Nahid Siamdous, we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And it's being called one of the most impressive scientific feats of the 21st century. Department of Energy officials have announced a history-making accomplishment in the decades-long quest to harness fusion, the same energy that powers the sun. The technology could have major implications for climate change and energy needs around the world. And ABC News chief meteorologist Ginger Zee joins me live now with more on this. So, Ginger, break this down for us. How does this process work? What exactly were researchers able to do here?
You see all of my notes.
Love it.
I don't always have
We're
notes
nerding
like
out
this.
Today. I'm into it.
Stephanie Ebbs, who's on our climate unit, and I were just listening to the entire announcement, and I could have sat and listened to the panel forever, because it's once you get it, you get really excited. And fusion, which is what they've now accomplished, a contained fusion, which is a combination of atoms. It makes sense, fusing, right? Now, fusion of hydrogen atoms is something that we've known for more than a century could work. We've actually done it in an uncontained form called nuclear bombs. We don't want to do that.
No,
that has a lot of bad implications. This would be a safe and equitable way to put a sun or the stars in a box and the power that they hold, and then be able to distribute it to people. And that's why this is so exciting. It's something that they've been working on at this lab for more than 60 years. But science is all about trial and error and about possibility. Now they've made that possibility a probability, and this really then becomes more about time and how do we get it done as fast as we need.
Well, and this has been a decades-long initiative. So what are some of the challenges they faced along the way, and how did they finally overcome that to get to where we are now?
They were describing how they've put 192 lasers against a tube for decades, and they haven't gotten just the right combo until just last week. So that's exactly what they were doing. The pellet, they said, the size of a little like BB gun's pellet is exactly what they were pointing those lasers at, trying to get the heat just right. And now this turns into something that is incredibly important for not just the United States and our future, but the world of energy. The Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, started it out, and she had a really good sound.
We can advance fusion energy. We could use it to produce clean electricity, transportation fuels, power heavy industry, so much more. It would be like adding a power drill to our toolbox in building this clean energy economy.
That power drill that doesn't create carbon, it doesn't create nuclear waste, none of the things, because what we've done with nuclear power in the past is fission, that's breaking apart those atoms. This is a completely different combo. But what's going to be the big question is, how do you get the materials? How do you get the rollout? And people were asking really good questions, like, you say a decade until we can do this, but really, when does it become commercialized? It could take decades from now. And that's where, in the world of climate change, that's not what we want to see, because we need a quicker. We've already seen how difficult it is to think about changing a grid for solar, wind, offshore wind. Imagine if we start to have to make fusion laboratories everywhere and trying to take the harnessing of the sun and stars and putting that out into our grid.
Is there any kind of a building block process here where maybe we can link between where we are now and where they see us being in decades?
I think there's no question. I think they were waiting for the science to come in, but now it's going to take money. And somebody said it very well. This is no longer just a public funded thing. It has to become a privately funded thing. And we're talking about those plants, which a lot of places, I guess in the UK, there are several that are working on the magnetic fields and how to do this and make these operable. Like, they were waiting for this, and then they're ready to put this into motion. But still, decades from now is not going to be quick enough, especially when most scientists in the world say we need to get away from fossil fuels yesterday.
All right, the clock is ticking. Putting the sun and stars in a box. Love the analogy, Ginger. Thank you.
You got it.
And President Biden is set to sign a historic bill on marriage equality today. The legislation protects same-sex and interracial marriages under federal law after passing with bipartisan support. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins me live from Capitol Hill now with more on that. Jay, this was a rare bipartisan victory. So how did we get here?
Yeah, and it comes out of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and concerns out of that opinion from Clarence Thomas, that dissenting opinion, or that concurring opinion, rather, that there would be a potential precedent to overturn other rights that were given through Supreme Court decisions, like the right to same-sex marriage and interracial marriage. So the House passes this law in July. Then it goes to the Senate. There has to be some bipartisan negotiations on how to make it more passable in the Senate, because you need 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate, so 10 Republicans have to flip. Eventually, there is a negotiation. There's a part of the bill. There's an amendment that's added to protect religious freedom, and then it goes back to the House, where it's voted on and passes last week, and now, of course, it's on the president's desk. So it's been a long process for this, but it's been a priority of Democrats in both the House and the Senate to pass this before January and before Republicans take control of the House of Representatives on January 3rd.
Now, the bill does not require states to issue same-sex marriage licenses. So how exactly does it work? Because it took a little compromise to get here.
Yeah, and it's really a stopgap in case the right to same-sex marriage was overturned. What it really does, this legislation, is it compels states to recognize marriages from other states, right? It requires states to honor all marriages. It does not require states, as you're seeing here, to issue same-sex marriage licenses, but it mandates that they recognize licenses in other states, meaning if same-sex marriage is legal in the state where you are married and that state recognizes it, and you move to another state where, in a world where same-sex marriage, the Supreme Court case had been overturned, then, of course, that state would still have to recognize your marriage. It doesn't go as far as some wanted, but this is the House and Senate's way, particularly House and Senate Democrats' way of in a sense, attempting to codify in federal law the right to same-sex marriage. It, of course, doesn't go all the way in doing that, but it gets close enough that House and Senate Democrats are satisfied.
Jay, how big of a win is this for President Biden? What do you think we'll hear from him at the signing today?
Well, it's a win for the president. You're going to see a celebration at the White House today. There are musical acts planned. The president is going to speak. There are survivors of the Pulse nightclub shooting there and other advocates as well. But it's really also a large win for House and Senate Democrats, who, as I said, were really under pressure to pass this before January. It was one of their priorities to get done in this lame duck session of Congress, particularly after Republicans won that narrow majority in the House in November, Diane.
All right, Jay O'Brien for us on Capitol Hill. Thanks, Jay. Coming up, new details on the Idaho College murder mystery. With the killer on the loose for 30 days now, why police are expanding their investigation across state lines. Welcome back. We are learning new details in the Idaho College murder mystery. Authorities say they have received several new tips as investigators expand their search. But they say there's still a lot of information they are not releasing to protect the integrity of the investigation. Kana Whitworth is in Moscow, Idaho with the latest.
Pressure and frustration growing in Idaho as the hunt for a murderer hits 30 days with no results.
You can feel it here in Moscow. It's just a very heavy cloud. It's a hard place to be.
Police spokesperson Robbie Johnson telling ABC News they brought in an army of experts and FBI support to comb through new tips about the white Hyundai Elantra seen in the immediate area in the early morning hours of November 13th.
We'd like to know who was in that car that night, where it might be now. It could be in a different state. We have resources across the country that are ready to jump on any information we can provide on that and follow those leads and talk to whoever is in that car.
Local businesses heeding the call, turning over surveillance video, anything that might help.
They said that ours was actually one of the best, clearest. They could see clear across to the other side of the road. So they were kind of hopeful when they did get that footage.
With new details, authorities re-interviewing residents, bringing back memories.
Do they have those reports of a scream that was heard?
They're aware of people talking about that happening. And of course, they're looking into that type of thing. every bit of information that comes in, they're looking into.
The university preparing to close for winter break after holding commencement ceremonies over the weekend, honoring Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonzalez, who was set to graduate. Instead, her father, Steve, desperate for answers and pleading with authorities to find the person and the weapon responsible.
This was a brutal weapon. It sounds like it was a professional type weapon that couldn't break. And they weren't stab wounds. You know, they were like large punctures.
And Diane, you know, authorities say there is no elevated risk right now, but they are still asking people here in this normally close-knit college town to remain vigilant, to travel in pairs, to stick to well-lit areas. In fact, authorities saying this should be a new way of life in Moscow, at least for now. Diane.
Kana Whitworth, thanks for that. Coming up, a couple found a listing for their dream home and made an offer. But is the cat included? Their heartwarming story after this. Welcome back. When engaged couple Tori Taliak and her fiance Alex were looking at a potential new home in Salt Lake City, they were thrilled with what they saw. But they never expected the house would also come with a bonus new addition to the family. Will Gans has more.
When you buy a new home, the seller will often throw in some appliances or even a chandelier if you're lucky. But Tori Taliak and her fiance Alex's new house came with Loki.
And this is the cutest thing ever.
The engaged couple recently moved from D.C. to Salt Lake City.
We're looking for a home before we moved, and we're pretty specific that we wanted like a mountain view.
Until finally, 3 weeks ago.
So Mountain View was first on the list. Adorable Cat was not on the list.
So funny thing was, I had been wanting a cat ever since we lived in DC. We went to see the house, forgot about the kittens. You know, we're trying to buy this house, and it just magically, we got a cat with the house. So.
At the couple's first walkthrough, Loki the cat stole the show.
There's like a sliding glass door and you just see the view, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. And the funny thing was, right when we walked outside, this cat who was inside, their cats were still in the house, followed us outside into the yard and just rolled on its back and was like looking for belly rubs.
Taking Loki's warm welcome as a sign, Tori and Alex put in an offer. It was accepted.
And he's like, oh, I have these air purifiers here too that I got. And he's like, I'll just leave those here. And I was like, if you want to also leave your cat, I love him. And he's like, well, if you're serious, this cat would actually love to stay with the house.
The seller was downsizing, but Loki loves to hunt in the backyard. So he stayed. Tori, Alex, and their dog Marcus moving in.
2 days, 3 days, they were both sleeping on our bed at night.
So fair to say that the mountain view is nice, but Loki makes the house a home.
He's the best part. Yeah.
Not to worry, Diane. Tori and her fiance have kept in touch with the seller, sending him lots of photos and videos of Loki and Loki's new best buddy, Marcus. I guess this isn't a turnkey situation. It's more about Loki. Diane?
Loki. Well done, Will Gans. Great to see the family happy. Thank you. And I'm Diane Macedo. Thank you for joining us, and stay with us as ABC News Live continues with more news, context, and analysis.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.